Copper cable theft is a nightmare in South Africa. The impact is felt far and wide. Infrastructure crumbles while the economy also takes a knock. This appealing commodity for criminals has left everyone else paying a heavy price. Jenni Irish-Qhobosheane, Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime Senior Analyst, joins us now to talk more about this. Jenni, thank you so much for your time. We often talk about, copper cable theft, but do we really understand the impact that this has?
No, I think very often we look at it only from an electricity point of view, and we felt that impact. All citizens have felt that. But I think what we're seeing is more and more in different sectors, this is becoming a serious issue. If one looks at the health sector, we've had serious thefts at some of the hospitals, which has affected services at those hospitals. We've seen in the mining sector situations arising where people have been trapped underground as a result of cable theft. We see in the construction sector projects being delayed because wiring and copper that has been laid down has been stolen. So I think we're seeing in the transport sector, it's obviously very bad. We saw last week what happened with the social laws of train in terms of copper theft. So I think it's affecting us on a whole lot of different levels, and not just with regard to electricity, which is obviously a major problem.
And you talk about the health sector, for example. One thinks about the serious consequences that this has for infrastructure and the economy, and you think about thieves, for example, making away with a 10-meter copper pipeline at Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital last year. We carried the story, the impact that we just spoke about on the trains as well. So what makes it so attractive to criminals? Let's tell the viewers.
I think that what we're looking at in terms of this is that the international copper prices are extremely high. Copper is a commodity that can be reused and recycled, and it doesn't lose too much quality. So I think it becomes very attractive to organized criminal syndicates, particularly when it comes to the export and the smuggling of copper out of the country, where they can actually take copper, repurpose it, and then export it out the country and sell it for substantial amounts of money. And I think there are different levels involved in this. When one looks at the kind of foot soldiers that are involved in the theft, they make substantial amounts of money, but not that much. As it moves up the chain, more and more money is made out of this commodity.
So it sounds like there's now, as we've called them, syndicates. Take us through them as to how they operate, because you're talking about these foot soldiers who are right there on the ground, but give us a sense of the layers involved.
So I think at the bottom of it, you have two types of people. They are at the lowest level, and they're the people that actually take the biggest risk for the least reward. They would be the ones that go out and steal the copper. And you have two types of groupings there. You have your petty criminals who will steal small amounts of copper. You often see them in your neighborhood taking small amounts of copper from electricity lines, etc. And then you have highly organized syndicates that are often men armed, and they'll take on the security, and they take large sections of copper, and they are at the bottom of that syndicate. They then sell that copper on to informal scrap metal dealers, bucket shops, etc., who then repurpose it and sell it on to either bigger recyclers, either registered or unregistered recyclers, who then repurpose it and move it up the chain in terms of, particularly when it comes to the export market, they would actually then containerize that and send it out of the country, often misdeclaring what it is, not saying it's copper that's going out of the country, saying it's either raw copper, or saying that it's sometimes even clothes or shoes or whatever, and export it and sell it to people out on the international market, some of whom themselves know that they are buying stolen copper and would purchase that copper on the international markets.
It sounds like the more you steal, the richer then you are getting. But let's talk about the sanctions, because we seldom hear about them. Are we seeing enough people being put behind bars for this crime?
I think there have been some notable successes when it comes to some of the syndicates that have been involved. We've seen a couple of cases where there've been quite significant sentences, and where people have been charged under the Prevention of Organised Crime Act, as opposed to just the theft of copper, or under the Criminal Matters Amendment Act for that. And there've been some successes, but I think we're still really focused on the lower level of the networks and syndicates, on the people stealing the copper, the kind of smaller scrap metal dealers or the bucket shops that are actually receiving the copper. We need to be getting to the high levels of the syndicate if we want to impact on this.
So are we focusing on the low level then because of a lack of intelligence gathering, or is there something else at play?
I think to a large extent it does have quite a bit to do with the intelligence and the ability to profile and understand how the networks are working. I think it's also that a lot of copper thieves are caught in the act or just after, while they're transporting the copper, etc. Once it moves up the chain, it becomes more difficult. Once it's been reprocessed, it becomes more difficult to identify. So I think there are real issues in terms of prosecuting it up the level, but I think that we need to have greater intelligence, greater understanding of how the networks involved in this are operating, and greater international cooperation around how we begin to deal with this.
And talking about dealing with it, it's been something that's been talked about over time by various officials who say maybe we should explore declaring this treasonous and charging people with treason because you are sabotaging the economy, essentially. Should we do that? Maybe we can see that could be a deterrent?
You know, we already have two really concrete pieces of legislation on the books that we can use. And I think where they have been used, we've seen long sentences, quite significant prosecutions happening. We have the Prevention of Organised Crime Act, where they can not only be charged with this theft of copper, but also with money laundering and a whole lot of other organised crime offences. And that's worked quite well where it has been used. And then we have the Criminal Matters Amendment Act, which actually specifically looks at where you are hitting infrastructure and has greater sentencing, bail conditions are greater, etc. when it comes to that. So I think we have legislation on the books already. The point is that we need to use those in all cases, and we need to use it not just with the lower levels of the syndicate, but with the upper levels of the syndicate.
So true. And I wonder then, as we end off, do we have, the value of the impact on the economy this year?
I think it's really difficult. I mean, we've had a lot of different estimates. So if you look at Transnet, PRASA, if you look at Transnet, Eskom and Telkom alone, they're saying that it costs them about 7 billion. Estimates for the impact to the economy, which is not just the actual copper that's been stolen, etc., but it's the impact of having blackouts in areas for 24, 48 hours at a time. Some people have put it as high as 187 billion.
Sure, Jenni. And as you say, one hopes that this is dealt with on all levels so that we can begin to really deal with this particular crisis. But thank you so much for putting us into perspective and just giving us a sense of how things work here and who is involved and how then, do we begin to understand and make sense of the impact, the real impact of copper cable theft. Do appreciate your time. That is Jenni Irish-Qhobosheane from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime, and she's a senior analyst there.